Hey, hello, Mona. All the way from Singapore. How nice is that?
Yes,
And
very far away.
it's very far away. It depends from where you are, of course. But no, I find it I'm so pleased that we have this conversation. I was also so pleased that you're part of the RegTech book, because this is one of those situations where we met over social media. We started to connect to each other. We started to exchange ideas and thoughts. And then we had a few phone calls, and now things are becoming very much connected, and that's so cool. So many people believe that this never happens, but we are obviously a living proof of this. So what you brought in the article was a view about how RegTech is implemented or has been perceived in Asia, and mind blowing. So what is happening there, Mona? Enlighten us.
Yeah, no, I mean, as a lot of people probably know, there's a lot happening in this region, and especially also in Singapore. I mean, Singapore is perceived as one of the biggest fintech hubs, and therefore also RegTech is really coming up quickly. However, what I also try to highlight in this article is that although from a outsider's point of view, it looks all very well established, if you really look into it from a more execution or adoption process, we are still a little bit lagging behind, and that comes through a couple of things, and not in the least that from a cultural perspective, it is of course different than Europe and or the US. Another point should be that we started a little bit later with fintech and RegTech here in Singapore. And I guess the other point is pretty much the government is very good in a pragmatic, top-down kind of structure. So from a governance structure, it is all very well thought of. But then in the bottom up, when you talk about creativity and adoption, people are not really ready yet, because the educational part is probably not there yet. It is still relatively new. It is now much more only talk instead of really implementation and adoption.
I'm a bit surprised actually with your answer, because looking at from outside and being in a RegTech company working myself, I'm actually intimidated almost by all the initiatives that are happening locally on the ground. So as an outsider, I have the impression that they really got it nicely together. I'm thinking, for example, about the initiative around KYC. I think it's great that the regulator stands up and almost acts as a subtech, as you mentioned in your article.
Yeah.
But then, yeah, sorry,
and
go ahead.
That is true. And what I mentioned all the great initiatives in my article as well. And that is exactly the point I try to make. So from a governance and from a government perspective and the regulator's perspective, we do a lot. And from that perspective, it is very well organized and very pragmatic. 2020, everything needs to be digital, and we will head towards that. However, when you peel that onion a little bit and you look into, okay, what initiatives are really being adopted? Well, that's why I'm saying for a couple of reasons, we are lagging behind in that adoption, like, adoption from a business perspective, like which banks are already really using those RegTech solutions. And for that, there are not that many. And that is more the top-down kind way of governance structure is pretty much in place. The bottom-up kind of creativity and adoption, there is that.
Yeah, I personally, for me, when I look at the industry, I sometimes make the equation between the bank, RegTech, and the regulator. And if I then look very critical to that situation, it almost feels that it's the regulator that can unravel the complex situation. And that's something that's now happened within Singapore, and there's other countries that do the same. I've met not so long ago somebody from the Estonian regulator, and that felt pretty much the same. It's very refreshing to an extent. But you say you miss creativity. So are there any initiatives in the market that are trying to get that bottom-up approach?
Yeah. So definitely, and because I think in a way it is also a little bit timing, right? I mean, I think for the people itself on the ground and the businesses, it needs to evolve a little bit more because we started later. But the initiatives are there. There is some talent. I mean, universities are now coming up with programs in fintech and blockchain and AI and stuff like that. So definitely from an educational perspective, there is now quite a bit of an emphasis. We also have the MAS is actually also coming up with the courses for the skill set of the future. That is actually just been implemented at the beginning of this year. So definitely there are initiatives to accrue local talent, also with like SG Innovate, who has a deep tech program that you can apply for. So and of course also get international talent into Singapore to make sure that the creativity will continue to get established.
Mm-hmm. Perhaps I'd like to zoom in a little bit in whereas you mentioned there is a difference in definition about RegTech, and there's a different definition in London than there is in Singapore, and I'm sure there's in many other locations. But what would RegTech mean for you then, Mona?
Well, for me, I use always a very broad definition, and that is because I do not think that RegTech is only for financial services industry. I think RegTech definitely goes into other industries as well, like healthcare, food and beverage. Every industry that needs a kind of an automation in its repetitive processes, and where regulation is actually much more a burden than an enabler. And the software solutions that are now being produced are so much more sophisticated in those areas of data management, data analytics, regulatory reporting, fraud management. I think that part can be all used to much bigger industries than only the financial service industry. So when we talk about RegTech for fintech, I think that is in part which was a certain pain point in the financial service industry after the tsunami of regulation. That will address that, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it also can address all the other industries.
No, I totally agree. And then even in the book, we have a contributor, Jean-Christophe Matonnet, who actually brings a live example how he has brought on his knowledge from the financial industry into specifically healthcare and the more actually also in the showbiz industry, where there's also a level of risk and there's also regulations. And I think the world indeed is changing to a much more regulated world after all. So interesting. No, I like that. So I always like to ask that question also, but because it's such a funny one and a very obvious one, RegTech. So are you more reg or are you more tech?
Well, I'm very interested in tech, but I must admit my background is of course much more from reg. So I'm still learning the tech in a way, because I know from an ecosystem play, you need all those components, right? So I am definitely the legal reg person, but if that part is not introduced into the tech, it will be very difficult to build a product which actually can be used by, for instance, the financial services industry or whoever, because the business side needs to be also included into the tech. What I see a lot of times is, especially here, tech companies or tech people try to build some funky stuff, right? And don't look at the reg or don't look at the business side because, for instance, blockchain is so fantastic and everybody is in hype by it. So they get some investment, they build this very nice blockchain tech tool, and then they try to sell it to a bank. And then the bank is like, I don't need this. This is not what would fit my legacy systems. And please go away, right? And then they are really frustrated. But that is exactly what I mean. You need to have all the right ingredients to make sure that you actually make something which is meaningful and usable, practicable, usable for those partners.
Yeah. That's true. What I really enjoy, Mona, is I hear a very passionate lady talking about things that she likes to work with and to collaborate and to do in the market. So I'm just wondering, is that where did you get your energy from? Is that from RegTech, or are there other elements in your life that you also get inspired by?
Definitely. I mean, I think we live in a very interesting time where we go from a people-driven environment into a data-driven environment. So the world is changing quite fastly, and I think we can be very proud that we actually live in this time to be able to make a difference where we would like to. So, and that is my goal anyway, to make a difference, right? So from that perspective, regulatory technology is for me a relatively normal kind of thing to look into, because I've been in banking for 15 years around the globe, and in legal risk and compliance, and specialized in anti-money laundering compliance. So I have seen almost the whole food chain, or from onboarding till regulatory reporting till advisory at a very senior level, and in different international banks as well. So I have seen all those pain points, and we were always looking at tech to make it much better from a compliance perspective, but still, be compliant and more efficient, effective, helping the business to generate business instead of, frustrating them. However, in the past days, it was very difficult to come up with very good software tools. And I think now it's the time that actually there are quite good technology software tools that is usable and that would make everybody's life much easier. Front office, back office, middle office, the compliance person, the senior management. It is all about the holistic risk management, which actually is really transforming at the moment. And that's what my passion is. I mean, I really would like to see that banks embrace this, or at least that people who need this kind of software, that they embrace it, because it enables them to be more strategic about what they really want to do and how they really want to be meaningful. And that's what we advocate, right? And as long as that's not clear, I mean, we still have a lot of work to do.
No, absolutely. It almost feels that there are three ways that are colliding, right? You got the whole idea about the crisis, that there is a need for change, and you got technology that comes up to par, and then well, from a third point of view, I think it's that momentum that we are creating at the moment, and it feels that the industry or doing business has much more to do with collaboration these days than ever before, in a different form, obviously. Well, obviously more digital, but it's very nice to see all those ingredients coming together, and I must admit that's also where I personally get some energy from. So interesting. Maybe a last question, if I may, and that's very standard in the interviews I do, because I think it's important that people know why they should contact you. Why should they contact you?
So I think we are one of the few companies in Asia and in Singapore who actually are pushing the cart for regulatory technology. And then, I mean, as a whole ecosystem. So we do that, of course, through a couple of initiatives, and we co-publish with you guys as well, and we co-create with tech companies. We have an acceleration program, very niche for companies who are already growing in their home countries and rolling out their products globally, so that we can help them here in this region with their go-to-market strategy, with their sales. I think that is really interesting, because that is something it's very difficult to infiltrate in the Asian market if you don't know the culture, you don't have connections, and you don't know how to start. Now, we are an island, more or less. We work with everybody together. We are agnostic. We have a knowledge database, and we have a database of 500 RegTech companies. So we are really the only company that is that much knowledgeable in this area. So that's why you should contact us.
Well, yeah, nice. When you say your work zone is in Asia, does it include where do you go? Or what's the parameter?
So we focus on Southeast Asia, and also a little bit on Australia and New Zealand, but mainly the English-speaking countries, because otherwise it is too complicated for us as well, because we don't have all the languages. I mean, China is a different beast. India, we are also a little bit far away from. But so it is really the Southeast Asian countries where our network also is, where it's easier to communicate, and of course Singapore itself. But it's really a gateway. We always emphasis you should land in Singapore, and Singapore has the best framework at this point in time. But you should not only, from business perspective, focus on Singapore. You should focus on Asia Pacific or Southeast Asia.
Yeah. No, very interesting. I like Asia myself. I've been in Hong Kong several times. So I can only speak for myself, but it's huge when you arrive, right? I really understand what you say, that it's difficult if you're a startup and you arrive, then you don't know where to start. I mean, which doorbell do you need to ring? That's almost impossible to know. So no, it's very nice to hear that people like you and organizations like yourself that are helping startups around the globe to do this. So with this, I would like to thank you very much also for your contribution in the book, your passion about RegTech. I felt it in the article, I felt it here. So thank you very much for that. And I would also say to all the listeners to this interview, please do not hesitate to stay just a little bit longer in the interview, because at the end you will get our website address, and feel free to go and have a look on our website to get more information about the RegTech book. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Koen.